This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Shulte. Welcome back to our show. Today I have a gentleman called Simeon Baum who's going to speak about mediation. Simeon Baum is president of Resolve Mediation Services. He has successfully mediated over 1,000 disputes, including the highly publicized one-time big mediation between the architect Libiskin and Silverstein Properties. Remember Larry Silverstein? Over fees related to the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. He is also mediated Donald Trump's $1 billion suit over the West Side Hudson River development. He also was involved in a mediation concerning Archie Comics. Now, you young people won't remember Archie Comics and Archie and Veronica, but us older people, that rings a bell. Simeon Baum was selected for New York Magazine's 2005 through 2014 Best Lawyers edition and Lawyer of the Year for Alternative Resolution Disputes. So if he talks about ADR, remember ADR means Alternative Dispute Resolution. Anyway, that was for the years 2011 and 2014. For over 30 years, Mr. Baum has mediated claims, so it has quite a track record, concerning financial services, fraud, security industry disputes, insurance coverage, property damage, personal injury, bank fraud, and the list of subject matter just goes on because he's been doing this for 30 years. Mr. Baum's peers have such high regard for him that they appointed him to the Alternative Dispute Resolution Advisory Group of the Supreme Court of New York County, the Mediation Ethics Advisory Committee for the New York State Court System. He is a founding chairman of the New York State Bar Association's Dispute Resolution Section, and his credits go on and on and on. He has taught alternative dispute mediation at NYU and Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. He has developed, and for 20 years, he has conducted a 3-day training program to train mediators for the Commercial Division of the Supreme Court of New York, Queens, and Westchester County. That's big stuff. To know more about Simeon Baum, simply type his name into your computer. I am truly impressed. I'm so glad you were able to come and be present for this show.
So, but anyway, there is that model of mediator as sort of quasi-judge. Then there's the centrist model, I'd say, across the states and across the world, actually. The most centrist model is mediator as a facilitator, someone, a helper, facilitating parties' deal-making. Accompanying that, if I could take a little detour for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is the Harvard Negotiation Project, okay? Fisher and Urey, years ago, wrote this book, Getting to Yes.
Yes, it was very, very, very famous.
Right, very famous book. And you remember there was a TV program with the mediator, and she says, win-win.
I never watched it, but I recall the book.
Right. So in the book, Fisher and Urey's book, they make 5 basic points. The whole book is a model of joint, mutual gains, problem solving as the way to look at mediation, and as the way to look at negotiation. And if you look at mediation as facilitated negotiation, then essentially what a mediator is doing is helping people solve their problems, and sometimes helping himself or herself as a problem solver. So that's the problem-solving model. Like the 5 core points of Fisher and Urey's book are, number 1, separate the people from the problem. When people make one another part of the negotiation, it gets very tangled up and nasty,
Yes, that's right.
right? So they say, be soft on the people, be nice to them, and be hard analytically on the problem. Figure out what's the issue. What do these people really need?
Then they can separate it.
Then they can separate it, right? And they say number 2, move from positions to interests. Don't say my position is, I win this case, and you say your position is you win this case, and that's it. No, stop thinking about just the legal case and who wins and who loses. They say, instead, look at what's important to you. What's important to me? What are your interests? What are my interests? What are our concerns? What are we worried about? What do we care about?
I think you're making a very, very important point right now.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know if you've ever heard the story of Susie and Sally, the oranges story.
No, I have not.
So Susie and Sally are these sisters, and they're both quarreling, and they have an Uncle Sal. And one day Uncle Sal comes along and says, and here's Susie and Sally arguing. And he sees they're arguing over a dozen oranges. Each girl is saying, they're mine. And Susie's saying, they're mine. Sally's saying, no, they're mine. And Uncle Sal, whose real name is Solomon, solves the problem. What do you think he does?
He cuts them in half.
Splits the baby, right? Cuts him in
Right.
half. This Uncle Sal does what King Solomon in the biblical story really did. He doesn't cut him in half. Some people sometimes hearing the story will say, well, king, he takes them all for himself. He doesn't do that either. He asks the question, why? Why do you want those oranges? And Susie says, I want the oranges because I need to make orange juice. I need the pulp for the orange juice. And Sally says, I want those oranges because I need the rind to make orange cake, and I need the zest from the rind to make orange cake. And by asking that incisive question, why, going to the interests of the girls, Uncle Sal, learns
The solution.
what they want and gets an optimal solution. There's this Italian economist, Pareto, and the Pareto optimum is the best deal, the deal that meets the interests of every party as much as possible. So all of a sudden, instead of cutting it in half and getting 6 and 6, now each girl gets 12 and 12. So that's known as expanding the pie. That's the win-win solution that you hear about in getting to yes. And that story, I think, is told by Fisher and Urey in getting yes. It's gotten to be very famous. By the way, just as a footnote, King Solomon never split the baby in half.
I don't think he did.
Right? He threatened to split the baby in half. And it was because of the threat that he learned the interests of the parties.
Yes.
And was able to find the identity of the true mother, whose interest would be the well-being of her child, as opposed to the other mother whose interest was the fame or the status or the power of being a mother, and couldn't care less about the child. So that's another message from Fisher and Urey. Move from positions to interests. And a related third message is generate options, like you get the orange peels, you get the pulp. Generate options that meet interests. And the fourth message from Fisher and Urey in getting to yes is standards. When you're in a dispute with another and you're trying to work something out, say it's an automobile that's been damaged and you're negotiating with your insurance company. What's the best way to figure out the value of your car if you're negotiating? And if you've ever heard of the Kelly Blue Book.
Oh,
But
sure.
yeah, so the Blue Book is an objective standard. It's not my will or your will. It's not a tug of war. And so this use of something that you can buy into and I can buy into as an objective standard gets us past the tug of war. By the way, that dividing the oranges, that's called distributive. And expanding the pie, that's integrative. Standards can often be very helpful if we're in a distributive game. how's the best way to divide these? So say you're in a, and there could be integrative components, but say you're in a trust and estates matter, and the siblings are trying to figure out how to divide all this real property, the personal property. And so they would say, well, you know, Mom always gave to each of us equally. So that's the equality principle. They could buy in collectively to the equality principle. Let's figure a way to do this equally. But maybe they're from like a red diaper baby family. You know, it's like always from each according to his or her abilities to each according to his needs, right? And that was our principle. And, you know, Jane, you know, she's suffering because, you know, she's not really making so much, and, you know, Joe's got, you know, millions, and Jane's got, you know, a kid with some issues, needs some extra support, and, you know, Joe doesn't have that challenge or whatever it is. So we think that Jane should get more than Joe. If the family collectively buys that Kibbutznik standard, right, each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs, they might say, okay, let's apply that standard and follow it. So the use of standards transparently is part of this problem-solving model. And the final point, and then you don't have to read Getting to Yes unless you've read it already, but is the BATNA. Fisher and Urey say it's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, BATNA. And they say, when you're trying to understand a deal, it helps to think about what might happen if you don't take the deal that is currently being proposed. So let's say it's an employment situation. You got somebody who's employed, say is at a law firm. I know I shouldn't be focused so much on lawyers, but I'm sorry about that. But you get an associate law firm making $150,000, doing very nicely, $150,000. And it's been there for a number of years, and along comes somebody from a different law firm and makes them a proposal. Come and work with us. Let's say the original law firm is doing reinsurance litigation, you know, a little bit dry and tedious. And let's say the new firm is an entertainment firm, and this person has been, you know, always wanted to be a rock star. So if the new firm offers $150,000, they're matching the salary of the old firm. That's an easy one, right? That's an easy one. But say they offer 140. They're offering 10,000 less. And you were going to say, but what's your...
Well, the thing is, you implied in your example that there is the pleasure effect.
Right, exactly. So if you've got an equal offer and you've wanted to be an entertainment person, the equal offer is better.
Yes.
Because you got the pleasure. And even if it's 140, you might say the difference between $10,000, my BATNA is 10,000 richer if I stay at my old firm. But the difference for that $10,000, I'm worth it. It's worth it for me to have the life pleasure of being in this field. So BATNA as a concept helps people through knowing where you are and what your current, you know, assessing your current situation. That helps people assess the pros and cons of a deal. So all of that's to talk about the Fisher-Urey model of negotiation. Back to the question of how do you differentiate among different types of mediation. So the one kind of mediation is mediator as problem solver or mediator as facilitator of the party's problem solving. So now we've looked at the understanding-based model. We've looked at, you know, kind of the judge-mediator model, you know, evaluative directive. We've looked at the facilitative, facilitating problem-solving model. The final one I just want to introduce is the transformatives.
Okay.
And the transformatives say, look, the job of the mediator is really just twofold. The purpose of the mediator is twofold: empowerment and recognition. The mediator is not there to solve the party's problem, is not there to settle a case. The mediator's job is to help parties make choices, to raise up for the parties opportunities for the parties to exercise choice. That's the empowerment piece.
When you are given a list of mediators to choose, is there a little hyphen that says, this is his model?
That's a really great question. That is such a great question. Right now, no, actually. And actually, you know, I was giving you this list of actually, let me, before we break from
All
the
right.
transformatives. So on the one hand, empowerment.
Yes.
On the other hand, recognition. So that what the mediator helps people do is to recognize what the other person's feeling or thinking or saying, what their values are, to be able to show some recognition to the other party. And what they say is, when people come into mediation, they're in dispute, and dispute or conflict is a crisis in the party's relationship. And the mediator helps enhance the quality of the party's relationship by enhancing the quality of their communication. And as they do, and as parties feel more empowered, see, because if you're in a dispute with somebody, according to the transformatives, you are not happy. You're hunkered down. You're getting defensive. It's like, this person's out to get me. I got to look out for my own interests. And people don't feel good. They kind of feel ugly being in that kind of a mode. They want to come out of it. They want to be better. So the transformative theory is, if people see they can make choices, I can talk, not talk, leave the table, stay at the table, make this proposal or not, hear what this person has to say or not, try to understand them or not, I have the power. As people feel more empowered, their shoulders drop. They get a little more relaxed. And as they're more empowered and relaxed, they can actually open up. And in opening up, they can actually get what the other person's about better. That capacity, that growth in empathy, that is the recognition piece. And the reason it's called transformative mediation, that's the moral growth that occurs in the mediation, through the mediation process. It's the growth of empathy, which is a wonderful human thing. So having, back to your question on the check the box, what am I actually think, there was a lot of debate in the field starting in the mid-90s.
Yes.
There was this professor, Len Riskin.
Yes.
And he wrote a book, an article, a grid for the perplexed. It's a pun on Maimonides, right? And in his article, he made observations. Some mediators are facilitative, some mediators are evaluative, some are narrowly focused, some are broadly focused. He made this grid of mediator orientations. Leela Love and Kim Kovac, two leaders in the mediation field, took issue with him in an article where they took issue with Riskin's grid, and they said, "You talking about evaluative mediation? That's an oxymoron. There is no such thing." They said it's a mislabeling of terms. They made it all about labeling. And they said, actually, only real mediation is facilitative approaches, not evaluative interactive. So that's the context. There's a lot of debate in the field, all these different models. One of the nicest things I've heard on this whole issue of check the box and mediator types is this expression, the 360 mediator. It's also a notion, the protean mediator, from Proteus, the shapeshifter.
In other words, given the situation at this moment, I decide to try this, or try that, or try the other.
Yeah, and candidly, I think most mediators function that way. More, they'll lean one way, they'll lean another way. They might have fewer, greater capacities. They might have greater or lesser depth or breadth in their own capacities, which comes from experience, orientation, and awareness. There's actually, on awareness, there's a whole movement in the mediation field of mindfulness, I don't know. I don't know if have you ever tried any mindfulness practices?
Sounds to me very much like counseling.
Well, that's interesting. But I don't know if this would be a digression, but the way I got into mediation.
Which counseling is listening.
Absolutely. Deep listening.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And reflecting things back, etc.
Exactly. And by the way, for the transformatives, their model for the mediator's behavior is a micro-focus reflection. So for the transformatives, the mediator is like somebody in the back seat of a car. Parties are driving, not the mediator. And every once in a while, the mediator will say, "Hey, is that a red light? Do you want to stop or not stop? It's up to you." It's very, just reflecting back. That's all it is. I hear you say this. I hear you say that. The problem solvers will add to reflection back active listening, validating, empathizing, clarifying, summarizing. And they'll add as well reframing.
All techniques of counseling, really.
Yeah, do they do reframing counseling also?
Yes, they do.
Interesting. So, yeah, when we talk
What
about...
should we call restating?
Well, so there's restating and reframing. I think one of the characteristics of reframing is you can look for a bunch of things. Parties' interests, the issues, the proposals, their emotions, their principles, their values, identity issues, their visions, their bhatnas. And if you hear a statement, maybe a statement like, "This is a big waste of time. I want to get out of here. I'll meet you in court and I'm going to wipe your, whatever."
It sounds like something you probably would hear.
Okay, they say that. There are loads of ways of reframing that. You can say, "Oh, you're saying it's a waste of time. So I hear you saying you'd like to use our time productively. What do you think would be a productive way for us to use our time?" Okay, now you've seen something they care about and you've reframed it into something that's constructive. Or you say, "You're going to beat me in court. I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe it'd be helpful for us to understand better what the case is about." Now you've reframed it into, let's engage in a case evaluation. There are lots of ways. If you hear an interest in a statement, you can try to develop what the interest is, or the emotion. It sounds like you're feeling really upset. Maybe you want to tell me more about that. So the theory, and this is really rooted in Fisher and Urey's stuff, is that if you're trying to find the party's interest and design options that meet their interests, you need to know what they are, and people are not going to talk with each other if they are too threatened by the other. If I think if you found out what I want, you're just going to use it against me as leverage, I'm not going to share that with you, right? But if I'm encouraged to speak with you because I can see that you're really engaged in this problem solving, what can we do to help you? What can I do to help you? Let's scratch each other's backs. If the whole thing changes, and then it's much more constructive. So yeah, back to in terms of mediator types, that is a kind of the range. I was starting to talk about mindfulness a little bit. I don't know if it's too much of a diversion, maybe to tell you a little bit about how I first came into mediation in the first place. I don't know if that's going too far afield. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to know, frankly, what the relationship is before you do that.
Sure.
The interplay between mediation and negotiation.
Oh, great. So mediation involves the use of a third party. So I'm the mediator. I grease the wheels. I help people negotiate. They'll come to my office. We have a big conference room. We got separate conference rooms, and they sit around the table. And I create a forum for them. I make it comfortable for them. When we were talking about preparation, I didn't really get into some of these details, but I'll ask the lawyers to provide me with pre-mediation statements where they'll tell me the core facts. They'll tell me about the parties' histories. They'll tell me about the bargaining history, thoughts for how to get the case settled, any interpersonal issues. They'll attach deposition transcripts and pleadings and motions and decisions and spreadsheets on damages and contracts and you name it. Anything I need in order to be up to speed with them. And we'll also make sure we've got the right people in the room. So if they're bringing the CEO, we're going to want the other people to bring somebody with full bargaining power, authority to make a deal, not somebody who's got to go call somebody else. So we try to, as mediators, we think of the things that are going to make a negotiation effective, and then we try to get it lined up like a dinner party where all the plates are in the right spot so that you can have, it's going to be a good party and the odds of getting to resolution are greatly enhanced. So that's something in terms of preparation, in terms of atmospherics, in terms of managing communications, in terms of sharing information, in terms of helping people analyze information, in terms of helping people look at the interests and find balances and ways to make a deal. Finally, in terms of helping people come to the deal. At the end, when they've gone back and forth and they're arriving at a deal, we help them think about how to paper it. I don't like to let people out of the room, unless they've already written down a memorandum of understanding or some settlement agreement, however short it is. Well, I'll have people stay there until 1, 2, 3 in the morning if we have to, in order to get it done.